my last video, Retrograde Saturn, I have shared many insights. In this video, I will be talking on retrograde Saturn in all 12 houses. Retrogression is in itself a beautiful sign. It simply signifies that you should learn to pause, think, and then resume. Pause, think, resume. It is a good sign. Otherwise, the whole world is just running. Everybody is in rush. But retrogression planet or a native having retrogression planet, if that native is evolving or is an evolved soul, then that native can pause, think, and then resume. Even when it comes to learning astrology, there are so many men and women. What happens in Jupiter in first house? What happens in Mercury second house? What is this? Is this some kind of fast food? That is why in the ancient times, astrology was taught only to selective people. But this is a different age. So the point is that retrogression gives you the opportunity to sit back, to evaluate, and then to resume. Retrogression is a sign that signifies that you should face a certain situation and not react. Sometimes doing nothing is the answer to all your miseries. But who wants to listen? Once it happened, a man came and started abusing Buddha. And Buddha smiled. The man said, "Are you mad? I am abusing you and you are smiling?" Buddha said, "If you would have come 10 years before, then my sword would have killed you. However, now I am a different person. I am a changed person. Now, I don't want to get back into that vicious circle of action and reaction." That is the essence of retrogression. When a planet is retrograde, you get the strength to tolerate and to ignore all this kind of foolish men and women. So retrogression is in itself is a beautiful sign. And when Saturn is retrograde, then it is much better, because then you get the opportunity to sit back and to meditate on your actions, on your karma. So karmic evaluation is something that happens when Saturn goes retrograde. In this podcast, I have talked in brief on what happens when retrograde Saturn falls in all 12 houses. So let's begin. The very basics of Kundali are based on four angles that form the four pillars of a human existence. Dharma Trikona, angle of righteousness. Artha Trikona, angle of economics. Kama Trikona, angle of sexuality. And Moksha Trikona, angle of liberation. Dharma Trikona contains the sign of Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. Artha Trikona contains the sign of Taurus, Virgo and Capricorn. Kama Trikona contains the sign of Gemini, Libra and Aquarius. Moksha Trikona contains the sign of Cancer, Scorpio and Pisces. It is necessary to remember that Saturn, Shani Dev, is a very practical, judgmental planet. Saturn goes by the head and not by emotions, because emotions become hurdles in making a good decision or judging a certain case or situation. And so Saturn is not an emotional fool. Rather, Saturn is an emotionally intelligent planet. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. And so Saturn does extremely well in the Moksha Trikona Rashi, that is, in Cancer, Scorpio and Pisces. Saturn is very happy to dwell in these three signs, and interestingly, the three nakshatras of Saturn, Pushya, Anuradha and Uttara Bhadrapad, are located in these three watery emotional signs of Moksha Trikona. It is only when you act with consciousness that you can attain moksha. And so Saturn's nakshatra and Saturn himself does well in watery signs of Moksha Trikona Rashi. Being spiritual means being very practical in day-to-day life. It is a myth that spirituality knows nothing of being practical. In fact, it is the other way around. A real spiritual person is always very practical in his outlook and behavior. It is said that once a man asked the great master, "What is the most greatest flower in this human world?" The man thought that the master will say rose or lotus. But the master said, cotton flower, because it is cotton that enables us to wear clothes, else we all would have remained naked. Real masters are very practical beings. They are very compassionate, but they also are very practical when it comes to dealing in this human world. It is said that the guru of Saint Ekanath, Sri Janardhan Swami, was a great warrior. He used to go out on the battlefield, fight ferociously, and then when he was back in his fort, he would indulge in deep meditation. Young Ekanath would seek guidance from Janardhan Swami, and it was Janardhan Swami who made him realize that when it comes to money and transactions, one has to be very calculative and pragmatic and ensure that every coin is counted with accuracy so that the whole transaction remains transparent. It is said that Sai Baba would ask a certain devotee to pay 5 rupees, a very big amount during that early period of 1900s. 5 rupees was a very big amount. While on some occasions, Sai Baba would give away 5 rupees to a devotee. This was to clear the balance of past births. So it is a myth that spiritual beings are not practical. In fact, there is no one as practical as spiritual beings. And Saturn is always positive and strong in a spiritual being's horoscope. Since pragmatism and practicality come through the blessing of Lord Saturn, and so Saturn also does well in the signs of arthatory, that is in Taurus, Virgo and Capricorn. Vayu means windy or airy. It is observed that Saturn loves all that is connected with air or wind. Lord Hanuman is addressed as Vayu Putra, meaning son of the wind or son of the air. And you all know the closeness of Lord Hanuman with Lord Saturn. In fact, in our country, there are hundreds and hundreds of temples in which Shani Maruti, Saturn and Hanuman both are worshipped on Saturdays. It is said that whosoever worships Lord Hanuman with deep love and faith is liked by Lord Saturn, because you become what you worship. Always remember, you attract the qualities of the deity that you worship. Lord Hanuman is known for his deep love for his master, Lord Rama. Lord Hanuman is known for his courage. Lord Hanuman is known for his celibacy, brahmacharya, meaning he never indulged in any sexual relations. Lord Hanuman is known for his strict discipline. Lord Hanuman is known for his practical knowledge. It is said that he was the greatest engineer because under his supervision, Nala and the Vanar Sena, army of monkeys, built the greatest bridge, the bridge that came to be known as Ram Setu Bridge. And therefore, I always say that to become a good engineer, you need to have a good placement of Saturn in your birth chart and good placement of Mars in your birth chart. And so basically, Hanuman reflects all those great qualities of being faithful, being righteous, being honest, being loyal, being just, and being practical. All these qualities relate with what Saturn stands for. And so the windy signs or the airy signs, that is Gemini, Libra and Aquarius, are the most favorite signs of Lord Saturn. If you observe closely, then you will be amused to find that two signs ruled by Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius, fall in those two sets of Trikona Rashis. Capricorn belongs to the Artha Trikona, while Aquarius belongs to the Kama Trikona. And within these two sets comes the sign of Libra, in which Saturn exalts. All the airy signs are sexual by nature. In fact, the more intellectual you are, the more you are sexual by nature. Gemini, Libra and Aquarius are highly intellectual signs as well as also highly sexual signs by nature. And it is necessary to remember that in the natural Kundali, that is in the Kala Purush Kundali, the 7th house contains the sign of Libra, and Saturn exalts in the sign of Libra. So it is very natural that Saturn plays a vital role when it comes to happiness in sexual life or marriage as such. So all in all, Saturn simply loves the Kama Trikona, that is the sexual angle, and Artha Trikona, that is the economical angle, which brings the fact out that Saturn does extremely well in the 6 zodiac signs of Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So, now coming to the question of having retrograde Saturn in these 6 signs, the outcome remains positive. So, if you have a retrograde Saturn in Gemini, in Libra, in Aquarius, in Taurus, in Virgo, or in Capricorn, then you don't have to worry much. You are going to get positive results, though a little late in life. Similarly, if your retrograde Saturn is in the 3rd house, 7th house, 11th house, 2nd house, 6th house, or 10th house, then too you will get positive results though late in life. However, please note that retrograde Saturn in the 3rd, 7th, 11th, 2nd, 6th, and 10th house must be in the sign of Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. Only then you will enjoy the positive results of retrograde Saturn in your chart. Then the Mahadasha of such a retrograde Saturn will prove highly beneficial in your life. So far, I have discussed positive signs and positive house placements for retrograde Saturn. However, now I will briefly discuss the negative signs and negative house placements for retrograde Saturn. Saturn dislikes the Dharma Trikona Rashi. Dharma Trikona Rashis are hardliners. They are extreme in their outlook or behavior, and Saturn is always balanced. Saturn is moderate by nature. Saturn is not an extremist by nature. If you observe closely, then the politics of every country is divided in 2 parts: moderate and extremist. In the US, the Democrats are moderates while the Republicans are extremists. In India, Congress is moderate while BJP is an extremist. In fact, our freedom struggle movement was also divided in 2 groups. Bhagat Singh, Savarkar, Tilak were on the side of extremism, while Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, and Vallabhbhai Patel were moderates. In our school history book, we had chapters on moderate and extremist leaders of our freedom movement. So Saturn is not an extremist. Saturn is moderate by nature. And so the extremist signs of Dharma Trikona do not match with the qualities of Saturn. And so Saturn is debilitated in Aries, the very first sign of Dharma Trikona. Dharma Trikona Rashis such as Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius has the quality of doing too much, and Lao Tzu says too much is the only sin. And so Saturn dislikes Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Whenever Saturn falls in these 3 signs of Dharma Trikona, you are bound to get a good lesson from Lord Saturn. As far as the mokshatrikona Rashis are concerned, Saturn precisely does well in Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, but only if your horoscope is inclined towards spirituality. And so now I will mention the signs that Saturn dislikes. The signs that Saturn dislikes are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Similarly, Saturn is not comfortable in the 1st house, 5th house, and 9th house. Many people assume that Saturn does well in the 9th house, but I have seen many men and women with Saturn in the 9th house, and they face many issues related to their relation with father, attaining higher education, and challenges in long travels and difficulties in learning the higher sciences of human life. Remember, Saturn hates religious hardliners. Saturn hates pomp and show off, and Saturn hates war and violence. So now when retrograde Saturn is in the 1st, 5th and 9th house, you should expect negative results, because even a normal Saturn in these houses gives negative results. And so retrogression would make matters worse than otherwise. I will now begin by sharing the general essence of retrograde Saturn in all 12 houses. I am sure that most of my close followers would have already guessed the outcome based on the briefing so far. So let's begin. Retrograde Saturn in first house. This is a very negative placement. The person suffers from self-doubt, lacks confidence, and is constantly thinking about whether he is doing the right thing or not. It takes time for such a person to understand the reality of life. This position of retrograde Saturn impacts health, and the person suffers in life due to constant health issues. It may happen that during old age, such a person may become bedridden. I would say such a placement proves somewhat positive only when the retrograde Saturn is in Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, Gemini, Libra or Aquarius sign. If retrograde Saturn is not placed in these signs, then the person suffers from self-doubt, has a low confidence, is timid and is not progressive by nature. Such a placement restricts the person from expressing his feelings to another person. Self-expression is blocked. Usually, such a man finds difficulty in expressing love, and so failure in love matters is also possible with this placement. Overall, not a good placement for retrograde Saturn. Retrograde Saturn in second house. This is a positive placement. The person slowly and steadily builds fortune for himself. It is an excellent placement for those associated with banking and wealth management. The person suffers especially if the sign is not suitable to Saturn's nature. As explained earlier, if Saturn is in Libra, Gemini, or Aquarius, then there is some hope for a positive outcome. Else, the person is devoid of wisdom and generally wastes his or her life living an average life. Retrograde Saturn in the second house is not favorable for family support. The person lives alone, or even if he or she has a family, there is a serious problem of trust issues and the native cannot count on his or her family. This retrograde Saturn may lead the native to multiple visits to the dentist, and if the sign lord of second house is also retrograde, then there is a serious issue with teeth, eyes or throat. In fact, if a woman or man having retrograde Saturn in the second house gets his or her tonsils removed, then it is good, since this placement makes the person suffer due to cold and sore throat. Retrograde Saturn in third house. This is an extremely positive placement. If the overall chart is of high quality and the person is an evolved soul, then such a placement is a sign of great spiritual progress. A Paramahans is born with such kind of placement. Such a person thinks differently. His point of view is very unique and uncommon. And so, common, shallow men cannot understand the uniqueness of such a person. Ideally, such a person does well in a free society. Conservative societies simply spoil such a beautiful person. Such a person therefore should either become an independent business owner or simply shift to countries like US, Canada, or Australia, since these countries provide the necessary platform to express new ideas, unique ideas, and even strange ideas. Many of today's well-known companies such as Facebook, McDonald's, Kellogg's, KFC, Twitter, LinkedIn were born out of unique ideas that revolutionized our way of living, and all these companies were born in a free society called US. So men and women with this placement should definitely seek opportunities in free society or else establish their own enterprise. Overall, this is an excellent placement for retrograde Saturn, especially for those who have an entrepreneur spirit and are willing to make a change in people's lives through their unique ideas and concepts. Relationship with siblings is good, though not very warm. These people don't express their feelings openly, and so even with their siblings, they behave in a very cold manner, though they understand their responsibilities towards their siblings and take great pride in executing those responsibilities by taking good care of their siblings. Overall, this is one good placement for progress in life, especially if Saturn is in watery sign, earthy sign, or airy sign. Retrograde Saturn in 4th house. This is again a wonderful placement. Such a person is very sincere and knows the meaning of the word responsibility. In fact, it is always good to marry a man or a woman having this placement, because a responsible wife or a responsible husband is always good to have, considering running the whole house is not an easy job. Interestingly, I always had a very good experience with men and women having Saturn in 4th house. Retrograde Saturn, though, is a different case altogether. When Saturn is retrograde in 4th house, the person feels as if his whole life is burdened by the responsibility of his mother. Getting stuck in property matters, getting delayed possession of apartments are some common observations. This placement brings too much of attachment towards mother, property, cars and bikes. However, this placement also brings a certain emotional turmoil in native's life. The person is not free in the true sense. The person struggles to find his freedom, but is constantly under the pressure of society and family. This is a highly materialistic placement and can become a hurdle, especially if the native is seeking the spiritual path. In short, retrograde Saturn in the 4th house will make the person realize the significance of responsibility towards his family, his homeland. However, as time passes by, the person slowly gets buried under the many responsibilities of material life. Thus, materially this may prove beneficial since the person executes his responsibilities successfully, but spiritually the person is at a loss. He wonders if at all there is any freedom in this world. If 4th house retrograde Saturn is in watery sign, then the person constantly suffers from emotional turmoil. However, if 4th house retrograde Saturn is in earthy, airy signs, then the person does well in executing his responsibilities towards his family. However, retrograde Saturn in a fiery sign is a challenging placement. Such a placement brings much unhappiness in person's life. If Saturn is retrograde and is placed in the 4th house in the sign of Aries, Leo or Sagittarius, then it is a very challenging placement. The person seeks happiness but ends in utter disappointment. Retrograde Saturn in 5th house. This is not a good placement for Saturn. Fifth house is the house of creativity and intelligence. If retrograde Saturn falls here, then the person struggles to show his creativity. Even if the native is a creative person, still he will not get the credit for his creative work. These people struggle to get credit but are devoid of credit. Somebody else takes credit for the work that they have done and they just can't do anything about it. This is a very unfortunate placement. With this placement, either the woman becomes a mother at an early age or as soon as she gets married, or else she has to face much delay in getting pregnant. I have seen dull woman with this placement. Dull woman means a woman who may look beautiful but has no spark in her, meaning she lacks the charisma. Fifth house is the house of charisma. And so when it comes to customer facing job or people centric job, then these natives lack the charisma to attract good business or growth in their life. Fifth house, therefore, is very important for politicians or people who aim to become a politician. Because to succeed in politics, you need to have a charismatic personality. If you observe the US presidential elections, then you will realize that how much weightage charisma holds in US politics. John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George Bush were some of the most charismatic US presidents. Similarly, in India, Jawaharlal Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri, Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, and in recent times, Narendra Modi are some of the most charismatic Indian prime ministers. Charisma comes from Sun, and fifth sign is the sign of Leo. Leo rules the fifth house of Kala Purush Kundali, and so a heavy and that too retrograde Saturn in the fifth house is not much desired placement. However, if this retrograde Saturn is in airy signs of Libra, Gemini, or Aquarius, then it can deliver certain good results such as success in school education, success in becoming a good parent, success in studying a certain complex subject. Overall, this is a challenging placement, and the native can do well with this placement only when the Lord of the fifth house is placed well. Else, the native continues to struggle in life and at times goes into deep depression. Retrograde Saturn in sixth house. This is a good placement. The person is generally found to be sincere and service oriented. Some connection with government is possible. Either the person is in government service or does contracts with government agencies or gets connected with politics. Many people with this placement become good social workers. The native is too much duty oriented. Duty comes first is a slogan that match perfectly with these natives. Whether he is a military man or a medical doctor, they are always available to serve the society. Many good men and women who become famous because of their selfless service to the nation are born with this placement. Retrogression of Saturn in 6th house will create more burden towards executing duty with more efficiency, and credit comes late in life. So when it comes to promotion, the native face delays but not denial. Promotion is not denied but delayed. If the Lord of the 6th house is well placed, then this retrograde Saturn will generally keep you in a good health, and you will not face any health issues until you cross the age of 48. Overall, this is a good placement for retrograde Saturn. It encourages you to work hard as well as play hard. Retrograde Saturn in 7th house. Many people think that Saturn in 7th house is bad, but in reality, this is the most favorite house of Lord Saturn. In 7th house, Lord Saturn feels home. If the Lord of the 7th house is well placed, then retrograde Saturn in 7th house gives excellent results as far as marriage or relationship is concerned. 7th house signify the west direction. Saturn rules the west direction. And so, generally, if Saturn is in the 7th house, then the person should live in the west direction, as that proves much beneficial for him. Saturn is a highly practical planet, and so sex is not denied, but rather the person takes much interest in satisfying his or her sexual partner. Saturn 7 is good for having a good sex life. As far as sex is concerned, retrograde Saturn may delay the act of sex, but the duration is never short. And so, generally, this placement provides you with the power to sexually satisfy your bed partner. Be it business or marriage, things are delayed. It seems as if the native steps 10 steps forward and then goes 5 steps backward. And so things don't move ahead but at a slow pace. However, eventually the native attains progress in business as well as in relationships. Overall, this is not at all a bad placement, especially if the 7th house retrograde Saturn is placed in airy sign of Libra, Aquarius or Gemini, or if it is placed in earthy signs of Capricorn, Virgo or Taurus. Retrograde Saturn in 8th house. This is a very sensitive placement for retrograde Saturn. Person feels burdened by the expectation of others, especially when others expect material benefits from this native. Since the native is more inclined towards knowing the other world, the spiritual world, it becomes a kind of burden in executing the day-to-day responsibilities of this material world. The native feels a pressure in his subconscious mind that he has to do something about his spiritual progress. However, retrograde Saturn brings frustration since progress on the spiritual path is very low. Situation is better if this retrograde Saturn is placed in Libra, Gemini or Aquarius sign, or else if it is placed in Capricorn, Virgo or Taurus sign. Then the native is able to progress spiritually. But again, challenges such as financial burden is always haunting over their head. If retrograde Saturn is positive, then self-transformation happens, especially during Saturn's Antardasha or Saturn Mahadasha. However, if this retrograde Saturn is placed in Aries and is debilitated, then the native becomes a victim of black magic spells or gets haunted by some evil spirits. Overall, this placement is a very dicey placement. It is like a swing. It can uplift the native or simply lead to the downfall of the native. Depends much on which sign Saturn is placed, as well as the overall condition of the 8th house lord. Retrograde Saturn in 9th house. 9th house is not the right place for Saturn. 9th house is the house of Dharma. It is a fiery house since Sagittarius rules the natural house of 9th in the Kala Purush Kundali. Remember, Saturn gives less importance to Dharma and more importance to Karma. Saturn gives less importance to religious dogmas and more importance to humanity. Saturn is secular by nature. Saturn is a socialist planet, and 9th house is all about communalism and religious hardliners. And a cold planet like Saturn can certainly feel suffocated in the hot fiery house of 9th. and retrograde Saturn in ninth house makes matter more worse than otherwise. Relations with seniors is never good, and moreover, father is either absent or even though if he is alive, the native receives very less affection from his or her father. Native with this placement is not much lucky and usually is considered as unfortunate. Tragedies and many mishaps happen with this kind of placement. Overall, this placement invites more miseries in life than otherwise. It is a sign that the native has done much misdoings in his past life, for which he is now paying heavily this birth. If the sign is Libra or any other airy sign such as Gemini or Aquarius, then this placement can cause less damage than otherwise. Retrograde Saturn in 10th house. This is excellent placement. Such a native is a Karma Yogi. Karma Yogi means a man who performs his duties and actions without any desires to attain credit or fruits in return. Great socialists and political leaders are born with this placement. Retrograde Saturn may delay the process of succeeding in public life, but someday the native is recognized for his dedication and service towards the nation or society in general. Many top executives are born with this placement. If Saturn is in airy sign or earthy sign, then this is an icing on the cake. Natives with this placement are very good organizers, and when it comes to making decisions, they are very well balanced and sorted. Professionalism, disciplined lifestyle, and practical by nature. These natives attain late success, but their success is larger than life. Overall, a very rewarding placement, especially if the 10th house lord is well placed in the horoscope. Retrograde Saturn in 11th house. Retrograde Saturn in 11th house is always the best placement for Saturn. However, when retrograde Saturn is placed here, then money comes but with many delays and frustrations. Still, at some stage in life, such a native becomes super rich and achieves the many dreams of his life. For Saturn to manifest positive results, the Lord of 11th house must be well placed. The best sign for this 11th house retrograde Saturn is the sign of Libra, Aquarius and Gemini. This is excellent placement for government employee as well as for those who deal with government agencies. Such a native receives much respect from administrative authorities and generally is found to be a happy-go-lucky fellow. Luck with opposite sex is promised with this placement. Sex, pleasures and luxuries come your way, but only when Saturn is not placed in fiery signs. Overall, a much desired placement since it is highly beneficial from materialistic viewpoint. Retrograde Saturn in 12th house makes one sentimental. Person is too emotional and generally is not comfortable in expressing his or her feelings to others. This placement, however, is excellent for spiritual penance. If the horoscope is inclined towards spirituality, then this placement can become a blessing in disguise. Person likes to be alone, prefers silence and serenity. Retrograde Saturn makes matters of life more complicated since the native is unable to make right decisions in life. Such a retrograde Saturn, if has a good support of Jupiter, then things can work better than otherwise. Ideally, this placement is suitable only for a spiritual person, a yogi. If the person is too much materialistic, meaning bhogi, then this placement can lead the native to many frustrations and disappointments in life. If moon is in ascendant, then this placement can lead to much mental suffering. However, if Jupiter is in ascendant or if it is in 4th or 8th house, then the person will have a much inclination towards attaining spiritual bliss. So this placement, as mentioned earlier, can prove beneficial if you have a spiritual inclination. Else, this can become a challenging placement. This placement also signifies some issues with grandparents or ancestors. Native with this placement should perform yearly Shraddha Vidhi without fail so that the ancestors find their way and also in the process bless the native with happiness and success. Overall, retrograde Saturn is a wonderful placement as it slows down the pace of karmic activities that the house represent and thereby compels the native to pause, think, resume. Always remember, taking time to do nothing always brings everything into perspective. Retrograde Saturn simply wants to convey a significant message to you, and that is relax, recharge, reflect. Sometimes it is okay to do nothing. The most fortunate person, the most blessed person is the one who enjoys true leisure, who has time to improve his soul's state. And so, retrograde state is not a curse but an opportunity to reinvent yourself. Always remember, when things are bad, it's the best time to reinvent yourself. Interestingly, it is only when you start going through a difficult patch of your life that you start becoming aware. And it is this awareness that eventually leads you to reinventing yourself. And this is how real transformation happens. When you are rejected, when you are condemned and thrown out in the woods, you feel depressed, but you forget the fact that every coin has two sides. Similarly, every situation has two sides. All you need is eyes to see the other side. It happened once. A very famous Zen woman. Her name was Rengitsu. Very few women have attained to the Zen ultimate. This one is one of those rare women. She was on a pilgrimage and she came to a village at sunset and begged for lodging for the night. But the villagers slammed their doors. They were against Zen. Zen is so revolutionary, so utterly rebellious that it is very difficult to accept it. By accepting it, you are going to be transformed. By accepting it, you will be passing through a fire. You will never be the same again. So traditional people have always been against all that is true in religion. Tradition is all that is untrue in religion. So those must have been traditional Buddhists in the town, and they didn't allow this woman to stay in the town. They threw her out. It was a cold night, and the old woman with no lodging and hungry, she had to find a cherry tree for shelter. It was really cold and she could not sleep well, and it was dangerous too, wild animals and all. At midnight she awoke because of too much cold and saw, as it were, in the spring night sky, the fully opened cherry blossoms laughing to the misty moon. Overcome with the beauty, she got up and made a reverence in the direction of the village. This is what Tathat is. Overcome with the beauty, she got up and made a reverence in the direction of the village. Through their kindness in refusing me lodging, I found myself beneath the blossoms on the night of this misty moon. She feels grateful. With great gratitude, she thanks those people who refused her lodging. Otherwise, she would be sleeping under an ordinary roof and she would have missed this beautiful blessing, these cherry blossoms, and this whispering with the misty moon, and this silence of the night, this utter silence of the night. She is not angry, she accepts it. Not only accepts it, welcomes it, she feels grateful. Always remember, a man becomes a Buddha the moment he accepts all that life brings with gratitude. He is on the way, he is on Tao, and he is becoming meditative. So when retrograde Saturn compels you to slow down, to sit back, to relax, it is in your interest. Otherwise, the whole world is running. From birth to death, the common man is just running and running and running until he finally ends his race in the graveyard. But the presence of retrograde planet signify that you are not a common man. You are not a common woman. You are not born to run in this horse race that leads one to nowhere. You are born to look within. You are born to correct the course of your life. You are born to evolve into a much matured person. And so, my fellows, as I have mentioned in my earlier video podcast on retrograde Saturn, that retrograde Saturn in a good spiritual chart is a sign that makes one a Paramahans. And so no matter where retrograde Saturn is placed in your birth chart, if you have a good placement of moon, if you have a good condition of Mercury, and if your Jupiter is also in good condition, then you are on your way towards the beyond, towards becoming a Buddha. Gautam Buddha says, there have been many Buddhas before me and there will be many Buddhas in the future. Buddha is not a name. Buddha is a state of no mind. Buddha is a state of enlightenment. Buddha is a state of blissful silence. Silence is the most beautiful language. Sound is our mind. Silence is our being. Silence has a music of its own. It is not dead. It is very much alive. It is tremendously alive. In fact, nothing is more alive than silence. Bhagwan Raman Maharshi says, silence is more effective than speech. From silence came thought, from thought came ego, and from the ego came the speech. So if speech is effective, how much more effective must its original source be? Buddha reminds us of the language of silence. The last word of Buddha was samasti. Samasti means remember. Just remember to look within and rejoice in the silence within you. Your spiritual progress is measured by the degree of blissful silence you rejoice in. Silence of the mind is the most important step towards attaining self-realization, says the Divine Master, Bhagwan Raman Maharshi. Retrograde Saturn for an evolving soul is a blessing in disguise, as it slowly and steadily helps you realize the significance of silence. Blissful silence. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Sri Ganesha. Jai Guru. ઓમ ગમ ગણપતયે નમઃ. ઓમ ગમ ગણપતયે નમઃ. ઓમ ગમ ગણપતયે નમઃ.